A key accuser in Diddy's sex trafficking trial faced intense cross-examination today. Mia says the fallen hip-hop mogul abused and raped her, but Diddy's lawyer, Brian Steele, hit back hard with texts, a birthday video, and questions about her past. We're going to break down what she had to say, as well as another witness, and we're going to talk about it all with Law&Crime's reporter Elizabeth Millner, who is inside the courtroom for all of it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so another key witness in the sex trafficking, racketeering, prostitution trial against Sean Diddy Combs faced some very, very tough questioning from his lawyer. We're talking about Mia, testified under a pseudonym. This is alleged victim number 4 in this case. A former assistant to Combs testified that he assaulted her, he abused her, he sexually assaulted her. She faced some very, very tough questioning today from Brian Steele. This is one of Sean Combs' defense counsel. You may remember that he famously represented Young Thug in a very publicized trial. So lots to break down on what happened in today's testimony. For that, I want to bring on Elizabeth Millner, our Law&Crime reporter, who is in that courtroom today. She's been in that courtroom every day for testimony. Elizabeth, so good to see you, as always. Before we even get into the cross-examination of Mia, there was something really interesting that happened at the beginning of the day. There was a different witness, potential witness, and Eddie Garcia talked to us about what happened, because he came in before the jury got in, and there was a very important point about whether or not he's going to get some sort of protection to testify, right? We've talked about it before. You know, in these cases, particularly in a racketeering case, if Combs is accused of using assistants and bodyguards and others to commit crimes and conceal them, and he engaged in this pattern of illegal behavior, he's the only one that's a defendant in this case. You wonder if there are people who are going to testify against him for the government and were granted some sort of protection. So who's Eddie Garcia and what happened there, real quick?
Yeah, well, Jesse, Eddie Garcia is not the first witness in this case to get an immunity deal. We saw this kind of same scenario play out when George Kaplan had testified just a couple weeks ago. So Eddie Garcia is brought into the courtroom before the jury comes in, before Mia is brought back to the witness stand. This was something that happened first thing this morning. And so I was thinking to myself, we have to get to his testimony at some point today. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. But as far as when Eddie Garcia, or Mr. Garcia, was on the witness stand today, he comes in, and I was expecting, I don't know, just kind of a little difference of appearance. I was expecting him to kind of come into a suit, but he walked in very casually, walked up to the witness stand, did the usual. And so Maureen Comey was asking him kind of a series of questions on whether or not he was going to invoke his Fifth Amendment right to either plead the Fifth, take a plea, that type of thing. And so he ended up getting that same immunity order, very similar to the way George Kaplan did whenever he was called to testify before that had even happened, and the judge approved it, just very much so like with George Kaplan. And so we can expect that Eddie Garcia will be one of the next witnesses called to testify, possibly sometime tomorrow for sure.
And by the way, he's a supervisor at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, the site of that infamous alleged beating by Combs of Cassandra Ventura. And you wonder, why does he need this sort of protection? There's been a lot of talk about what happened to the security footage. Was there a cover-up of some kind? Did anyone accept a bribe or not? So it'll be interesting why it seems he wanted to invoke his Fifth Amendment right and needed some sort of protection. But I just thought that was interesting in terms of what we can expect from Mr. Garcia. Okay, so now we have to talk about Mia. Okay, so Mia's back on the stand. She's back being cross-examined by Brian Steele. And the way it began today, she was asked about her resume. What was going on there?
Yeah, it was one of the first things that Brian Steele was asking Mia about when she returned to the witness stand, because again, they had a weekend in between the first part of her cross-examination up until now. So I was kind of wondering where the direction would go. Would they find more video clips? Would they find more photos? Would they use that against her? So when Brian Steele was asking Mia on the stand about her resume, I was just kind of like, where is this going? And it seemed like that was the first thing on his mind, because he didn't say anything to the effect of good morning or hi, how are you? How was your weekend? Nothing like that. It was really just just like for Brian Steele, get to work, get this cross-examination underway. And so some of the first lines of questioning that he was asking her was, can you tell the jurors where you went to college? She replied, James Madison University. What was your GPA? That was objected to by the government, and that was sustained by the judge. Then she was asked just about her job positionings or job positions after she had graduated from college. She had mentioned that she had did this study abroad program, and then she became an assistant to somebody. And Mia, while on the stand today, was like, yeah, you know, I did that, but I don't necessarily recall what years, because I believed she graduated from college around 2005, 2006, so a good period ago. And then Brian Steele asked her, well, did you compile a resume? You said on your resume that you work well under pressure and you maintain thick skin. And Mia says, I don't remember writing exactly that. And then we see an exhibit photo of Mia's resume. She had a 3.6 GPA, so the defense got that GPA question in one way or another. Then you kind of see just her job experience from January 2006 to September of 2006, where she was working as an executive assistant to somebody else who was not Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And some of the descriptions that she used when describing her job positions were such as cater to celebrity clients and all their studio needs. And then we kind of got into more of her work history as far as working at a place called Pure Chemistry, and even her assistant role while she had worked for the actor Mike Myers. And some of the descriptions under that included kept inventory of all personal possessions and documentation, including passports. And so I was like, okay, I can see kind of where this is going. And then Brian Steele had asked her, well, when you said that you were being held kind of against your will when you were trying to escape from St. Bar's, that Diddy had held onto your passport, and she was explaining, Brian Steele was explaining that essentially everybody's passports were being held, that it wasn't just Mia's passport that was being held, it was everybody who worked within the staff, and most likely the family members whose passports were being held. And Mia replied yes. And then Brian Steele continuing on into her resume about you can take on a responsibility, and Mia responded, true. You're a leader. Mia kind of pauses before answering. She's like, well, I don't know how to necessarily answer that question. And Brian Steele kind of interjects and goes, but you tell others to speak up for themselves. And she responds yes to that answer. And then we see a kind of a close-up of Mia's same resume where she speaks 4 languages, has thick skin. So I think what the defense was kind of trying to imply is that everything she had gone through on the job was just kind of under the umbrella of it just being thick skin, working those long hours, working for days on end, getting the client or whoever you're working for, just everything that they had need. And so then we see the defense kind of pass out those same binders again with all their exhibits, the text, the photos, all of that. Right. And the judge kind of issues a warning to the jury, telling them not to flip through those until instructed. And so then we start to get into more text messages from all the times that Mia had left the job or after she left the job.
And we're going to talk about those because just to put in context why I think it's important they started out this way, what they seem to be really doing is not only trying to strike at her credibility, and we'll get to that in a minute, you know, that she wasn't necessarily abused or sexually assaulted, that her behavior would be inconsistent with that. We'll talk about it. But they seem to be really fighting back against the forced labor allegations. Remember, for racketeering, the prosecution has to prove at least 2 underlying crimes of this pattern of criminal activity. So there's sex trafficking, there's bribery, there's forced labor, there's drug offenses, there's witness tampering, arson, kidnapping. I don't even know if I'm repeating myself, but forced labor seemed to be a common allegation with respect to the assistants and with respect to Mia. So, you know, this idea of this really wasn't the kind of environment you're portraying, and you're used to these kind of environments. You could have spoken up if there really was a problem. You're a leader. That's the way that I saw it, that she wasn't singled out, as you said. So then you get into the text messages, and this is big, right? This is very similar to what we saw with Cassandra Ventura. Cassandra Ventura being used by the prosecution to say she's a victim of a sex trafficker known as Sean Diddy Combs, that this is beyond a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. He was victimizing her. Well, let me show you a bunch of her messages where it seems to say she encouraged freak-offs, she set them up. So now Mia is confronted with all of these text messages. Talk to us about what these messages were.
And it's not even just Cassie who was confronted with her messages even after the fact. We saw it with Deontay Nash. We saw it with Capricorn Clark. And to your point, Jesse, we saw it once again with Mia. So we see some exhibit photos going back to 2018. So this was after Mia was no longer working with Diddy. And so we see it from December 27th of that year, where Mia is telling Diddy, "Merry Christmas. I love you so, so much." Diddy responds 2 days later, "Same to you." Then a week later, Mia responds, "Happy New Year's." And then we see another text exhibit where Mia is talking about how she had nightmares, that she was trapped in an elevator with none other than R. Kelly, and that Diddy had come to her rescue in this dream or nightmare that she had. But then Brian Steele goes into Mia, where he's just like, "You told the jury that this person terrorized you and caused you PTSD. This was the same person who rescued you in this dream you had." And then there was an objection by the government. That objection was sustained by the judge. Then we go into another exhibit. This one, a text from Mia on March 8th of 2019, where Mia tells Diddy, "Sending you all the love in the world," heart emoji. And then Brian Steele, because there was a little more to that text message, but you guys know how it goes. It goes super fast. Sometimes I can't write it all down. But Brian Steele had asked her, "You weren't under Mr. Combs' spell or brainwashed by Mr. Combs then, were you?" And she had explained it was psychological. She was reaching out around this time frame because this was after Kim Porter had passed away. And we all know that Kim Porter used to date Diddy, as well as the two have a few children together. And Mia was explaining that she had felt horrible for Diddy around this time frame, and that he was grieving, and she just felt horrible for him because Kim Porter had passed away. And then Brian Steele is like, "Well, ma'am, this death occurred 5 months earlier." And she responded, "Yes. Why did you continue to reach out?" And Mia responds, "I didn't think 5 months was that soon. I just didn't understand what had happened to me being Mia, until recently." And then we see more text exhibits where we see a New Year's Eve text from 2019. We see a May 14th, 2020 text. So this is 3 years after Mia had left. And Mia had wrote to Diddy, "Puff, my heart is broken about Dre. You are one of the most influential people. I know it's excruciating. I will always be there." We see another text after Chadwick Boseman passed away where Mia had sent a text to Diddy. Diddy responds, "How are you?" and asks for, I guess, tapes of Chadwick Boseman doing an audition for James Brown. And Mia responds that she'll send Diddy this video. And again, this is around the 2020 time frame. So I think the defense was trying to point out, like they were doing with Cassie, like they were doing with Capricorn Clark, and like they were doing with Deontay Nash, is that there was still love there, even though these horrible things had happened to them.
Hey, I want to take a quick minute to thank Upside for sponsoring our coverage of Sean Diddy Combs' trial. Now, Upside is amazing. It is a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries. I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when doing all these things, right? And yes, this is actual, real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen, and make sure to use our promo code LC Sidebar. You'll get a special one-time offer of 35 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. That's promo code LC Sidebar for a one-time special offer of an extra 35 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Has the prosecution in Sean Diddy Combs' trial just proven a clear-cut case of bribery, a major underlying alleged crime of racketeering? Well, not only did a former security guard at the hotel where Combs allegedly beat up Cassie Ventura testify that Combs paid $100,000 for that surveillance footage, but then we heard from Combs' former CFO, the money trail. Oh, and by the way, someone had an outburst in court and was kicked out. Quite the day, and Law&Crime's reporter Elizabeth Millner is on with us to break down everything that happened. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What a day in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial. You know, I got a lot of questions about how is the prosecution proving racketeering conspiracy, on top of the sex trafficking and prostitution charges. But how are they proving racketeering, right? That Combs agreed to run this criminal enterprise that engaged in a pattern of illegal activity, that there are all these underlying predicate crimes. The prosecution has to prove at least two. So there's forced labor, kidnapping, arson, sex trafficking, drug offenses, bribery. Well, that one is very important and very particular to today. Why? Because we heard from a former security officer at the Intercontinental Hotel out in LA. So this is the site of where Combs purportedly beat up Cassandra Ventura, victim number 1 in this case, back in 2016, an event that was captured on footage. And by the way, remember, prosecutors say that she was leaving a freak off at that time, that this is evidence of sex trafficking, that Combs was using force to induce her to engage in these freak-offs. But we also heard from the former CFO of Combs Operations. Oh, and by the way, someone was banned from court and somebody else was kicked out of court for an outburst. So, for that and more, I want to bring on Elizabeth Millner, Law & Crime's reporter, who has been with us every day of this trial. Elizabeth, so good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come back here on Sidebar. So, let's start there. Someone was kicked out, apparently had an outburst, and somebody else has now been banned from the courtroom. And by the way, this was all in the morning before any testimony even began. What happened?
Yeah, a lot happened this morning, bright and early this morning. And to your point, Jesse, it happened before the jury was brought in, before the witness took the stand this morning. And a lot of us just kind of in the media, we've been kind of knowing about this person who we were all expecting to make some type of outburst. We were just kind of waiting on when this would actually occur. And so that was kind of the topic of discussion. So it wasn't that surprising that we saw this woman who we've been referring to as the MTA lady. We don't necessarily know if she works for MTA, but she kind of always wears this MTA jacket when she comes to court, and she's someone who stands in line with us in the morning. And so we've seen her. She isn't like as abrasive as maybe we were led to believe until we saw what had happened this morning. And so what had ended up happening is there were some arguments outside the presence of the jury. They were discussing Mia's testimony, and then all of a sudden I hear just kind of some screaming or yelling coming from behind me, and it was the exact same woman we all thought it was going to be. And so initially when court started, we thought that's when something might have happened, when Diddy was brought in, because it seems from our point of view that she might have been someone very much on the team defense side, team Diddy side. So we were thinking, oh, something might happen as soon as he's brought in. But no, we were in the middle of arguments. We were listening to what both sides were saying just regarding Mia's testimony. And then I look up from my notepad as I'm writing these notes, and she's just like facing the door, kind of looking like she's about to exit the courtroom. And then the marshals are coming kind of inward. And so it seemed like that there was going to be this big confrontation, but she's just yelling and screaming at the marshals pretty much. You heard curse words flying. You heard her pretty much say that, oh, you should pull out your gun or do this, do that, that type of thing. And then all of a sudden we saw the marshals kind of take her out of the courtroom. It took a couple of marshals to get her out of there, but she was yelling, she was screaming, she was saying things along the lines that this was the prosecution's fault. And so it was pretty disruptive this morning. And surprisingly, again, that this was something that had happened before. So not only was she kicked out of the courtroom today, but she was kicked out of the media overflow room during jury selection, from what I've heard. And so it seems like she's been disruptive, again, not once, but now twice. And it seems like as far as her wanting to get back inside this courtroom, she doesn't look like this will happen.
And Elizabeth, didn't she say they're all laughing at you to Diddy or something like that?
So I did hear that part whenever I was leaving the courthouse today. She was still kind of in this vicinity. She was still kind of doing, I guess, these interviews with these bloggers or vloggers, that type of thing. But yeah, she was kind of summing it up and saying that people were laughing at her.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily the case as far as what had happened this morning, but it seemed like she felt like she was kind of the butt of everyone's joke.
Oh, see, I thought she was basically saying, she was saying to Diddy, they're all laughing at you out there, because again, she does seem like her comments from the reporting that she was pro Diddy, so interesting to say the least. By the way, before we get into the person who has been banned from the courtroom, we'll get to that. You mentioned the arguments. There were arguments that were happening right before the outburst. Didn't they have to do with what the prosecution wants to introduce into evidence now, which could be very, very interesting if that's the case?
Yeah, for sure. And it seemed like after Mia was done with her cross-examination, I felt like maybe, and these are just my words. I'm not necessarily sure this is how they felt, but it seemed like the government really kind of felt defeated in a sense. They were talking about her cross-examination, hers being Mia's cross-examination, and just how the defense was very abrasive with her, that Brian Steele was yelling at her and essentially yelling at a victim of sexual assault and sexual abuse. And so what the government was proposing is that they wanted to offer Diddy's jailhouse calls because they want to produce the excerpts as as soon as this evening, and they feel like they're relevant, these jailhouse calls, because they corroborate Mia's testimony that she felt compelled to write those happy birthday messages throughout the years, saying happy birthday to Diddy, even when she no longer was under his employment, even after that she had parted ways with Revolt Films and with Diddy's companies. And so they had brought this up, not even surprisingly, they had brought this up previously during the pretrial hearings, where they were saying that Diddy, even from behind bars, was coordinating these specific kind of social media campaigns, whether it was to get his children to say happy birthday, capture it on video, then post it to his Instagram, just those types of things. And they were kind of bringing that back, where again, they were making the argument that Mia felt compelled to do these happy birthday posts, and they want to bring on these jailhouse calls because they believe that Diddy uses his birthday to kind of shape the narratives, and they believe that these jailhouse calls are probative. And again, this was something that they've been talking about since the pretrial hearings, where it seems like, again, even from behind bars, Diddy's kind of still directing things and kind of trying to, I think, reclaim his public image, that people love him, that people wish him well, that people, even on his birthday, even when he's locked up, will still wish him happy birthday and again wish him well as he's going through this criminal trial now.
I always wondered if his alleged activity from behind bars, including allegedly contacting people through improper means, was going to make its way into this trial. So it's possible it might. But now let's talk about the person who is officially banned from the court. You talked about Mia, so alleged victim number 4 here, testified under a pseudonym. This was a former assistant of Combs, claims that she was physically abused by Combs, that she was forced to work these long, crazy hours, but also that she was sexually assaulted by Sean Combs. So a very sensitive, important witness. Her identity remaining anonymous was important in this case. But my understanding is somebody was banned from court today who may have violated that, right?
Yeah, that is something that happened, I believe, yesterday. And the government did bring this to the judge this morning, where they were talking about how some of the attorneys were walking outside, kind of in the square area where a lot of us kind of go. We turn our phones back on after not having them all day. And somebody who was sitting, I believe, on the press side yesterday was live streaming during this, or making some type of video where, instead of referring to Mia as Mia, that is her pseudonym that was assigned by this court order, instead Mia was referred to by her real name. And so what ended up happening is the judge and pretty much the courthouse ruled that this person cannot go back into the courthouse, can't go back into the courtroom. And so we didn't see this person this morning, this individual that they were talking about, nor do I know this individual's name, but I know of this person. And so from what the government's perspective was, that they really just wanted the judge to kind of do something, knowing that we have another person who's testifying under a pseudonym as early as maybe tomorrow or even on Thursday, and that person obviously being Jane. And so from the government's perspective, it wasn't just that one instance of the person who was doing the live stream or doing the video saying Mia's real name. They also got another alert that somebody on Twitter or X also revealed Mia's true name after one of the exhibits by the defense was leaked or released. And so instead of redacting her photo or redacting her image, this Twitter post or X post just went up using Mia's real name. And so what the government did ask the judge is if they could find some type of way to order that this post be taken down. Not sure just the judge's kind of full extent as far as ordering this specific Twitter account. Not sure what this Twitter account's name is or anything like that, whether or not the judge can step in. But as far as Jane is concerned, they are making some different changes that are different from how Mia was testifying, where they're not going to be showing the exhibits to the public. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be seeing them on the screen whenever she does take the stand. However, the government did assure that the public would be getting the redacted exhibits of Jane's text messages, images that they are allowed to show that aren't sensitive in nature, but they just won't be coming whenever we see her testify later this week.
I'm not surprised by that. I've always been the point. I'm a member of the media. I don't think, even though there's an evidentiary value about what's going on those tapes and whether or not Sean Combs can be heard on those tapes, coercing her into certain acts, I think the risk of everyone else seeing it outweighs the benefit, even from a reporting point of view, but clearly important for the jury to see it. Okay, now we got to talk about Eddie Garcia. Okay, so Eddie Garcia came up yesterday first. So he wanted to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He was actually granted immunity to testify. This former security officer at the LA Intercontinental Hotel back in 2016. I'll tell you what, seems like it made sense that he wanted some sort of protection because he admitted to quite a lot. He helped support the bribery allegation, one of the underlying crimes of racketeering that the prosecution is hoping to prove, right? Because what did he say about that day in March of 2016? What did he see, and who was he contacted by?
Yeah, well, according to Eddie Garcia, when he was on the stand, it seemed like he was really kind of involved in a lot. So we meet Eddie on the stand yesterday, but then he took the stand again this morning. He was questioned by Mitzi Steiner. So what we know about him is that he's 33 years old and has been working in private security for about 13 years. However, in 2016, specifically on March 5th of 2016, which we all know now if we've been following this case, which we sure have, this was the day of the Intercontinental Hotel incident between Diddy and Cassie, where Cassie was allegedly leaving a freak off and then Diddy had attacked her, something that we all have seen at this point, the surveillance video. And so Eddie was talking about how on that day he was notified about an incident, the specific incident being a domestic dispute, and then he points out that this involved Sean Combs and Cassandra Ventura, points out Diddy in court, that type of thing. And so he said that he understood that under this immunity deal he had to be truthful in his testimony, but he was talking about how even during this incident he was just 24 years old and had only been working on the job just for a couple of months before this incident occurred. And so then he kind of discusses who his higher-ups are, or who his supervisors are, that being Bill Medrano, Director of Security, and Officer Israel Flores, the Assistant Director of Security. And one thing that Eddie Garcia said during his testimony that I thought was pretty interesting is that he's actually friends with Officer Israel Flores even to this day. He said he saw him a couple weeks ago. They didn't discuss his testimony, but he did say he saw a little bit of testimony on TikTok. And so that was kind of an interesting point. But then we get into the exhibits. And so what do we see from these exhibits? We see an employee sign-in register sheet, which kind of showed the hours that Eddie was working on the day of this incident. So he checked in around 2 p.m. and then he's supposed to leave his job at 10 p.m. every day during that time period. But however, on March 5th, kind of trickling into March 6th, he didn't get off until 1:30 in that morning, or 1:30 that following morning. And so he said he was shown surveillance video of this incident, and Eddie Garcia said that he could monitor the cameras at the security base, but he could see more than one camera at a time. But again, these cameras are motion censored, so he doesn't capture every single thing at every single moment, and plus there's a lot of cameras from his description of it. So then we see an exhibit, and this being the exhibit of the surveillance video from the incident. We can see Cassie in kind of that elevator bank or elevator lobby, if you call it that, and then we see kind of the point to where Cassie's kind of in her purse and trying to grab, I think, shoes or something out of her bag, and then you see Diddy come up, he hits her, he kicks her, she's on the ground. So it's something that we all have seen. It's nothing new to the jury, but Eddie Garcia was saying that at first during this incident, he didn't even recognize Diddy or Cassie, but he later learned it was the two that were involved in this, what was labeled as a domestic dispute. And so he said when he arrived at work, law enforcement wasn't contacted after this incident. And Eddie Garcia had said that it was because Cassie said that she didn't want police to be involved and that she didn't want medical attention. And so he had reviewed the incident report when he had arrived to work. And so then we see the incident report in an exhibit, and that again being from March 5th of 2016, where there were attachments to this report, including even video. And so Eddie explained that he got a call during his shift, about an hour or an hour and a half into his shift, but it was a call that didn't appear local, nor did he necessarily recognize this number, but it was an interesting person who had called him, and that person was none other than Christina Coram, who was Diddy's kind of right-hand gal. She was kind of, in a way, not just a fixer, but also his like executive assistant, and somebody who we, even at Law&Crime, know very well, it seems like, just from everything that has to do with Christina Coram. And so Christina had asked about this incident to Eddie and had even requested a copy of the video or just see the video so she could understand kind of what everything was going on with it. And so Eddie had said that Christina said that Diddy was intoxicated during this incident and that he didn't remember. And so there was an objection from the defense. That objection was sustained. There was a big sidebar, and then, not sidebar by Jesse Rubber, but there was a big sidebar, and then they kind of came back and started asking more questions. The prosecution was. And so Eddie had told Christina Coram that she needed to reach out to management. Then an hour and a half later, Christina shows up to the hotel, and she showed up to the hotel lobby asking about this video. And so Christina said that she was unaware of what happened on the video, but that she wanted to talk to hotel management. And Eddie Garcia kind of, I guess, tried to help navigate her into what she could do next, but kind of told her off the record, but on the record while he was testifying, that this incident was pretty bad. And so Christina called later again after leaving the hotel and passed the phone along to who else? None other than Diddy himself. And so Diddy had a chance to speak to Eddie Garcia, and Diddy said something along the lines of, "Do you know who I am?" And Eddie Garcia was like, he recognized the voice. He knew it was Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And so Eddie was explaining that Diddy sounded nervous on this call and was talking super fast, kind of how I always talk, and that Diddy was saying that he had too much to drink, and said something along the lines of, "You know how women are. If this video gets out, this could ruin me." That was kind of the gist of the call. And so Eddie was explaining that Diddy was stuttering through this, but had requested the video, and Eddie had told him that he needs a subpoena to get this video. And so then Eddie Garcia sends an email to his higher-ups just about Diddy calling, requesting this video. And so we see an exhibit of Eddie mentioning this to his bosses. And so it says, "Mr. Combs, who is staying in room 602, requested to have a sit-down meeting with you in regards to the incident." And then I'm paraphrasing here. Mr. Combs mentioned that he has a lawyer who had notified him that there was a thumb drive and was really concerned. And so at the bottom of this email, then we see kind of a link or just a contact information for Christina Coram. And so Christina then contacted Eddie multiple times after this, even when Eddie was at home. She somehow got his personal number, and Eddie was saying that he didn't even provide his number to Christina or even Diddy. And so he said he was nervous and scared about why he was getting calls to his personal line and how the two even obtained his personal number. But Christina said that she would introduce herself again and gave the phone to Diddy, and Diddy had told Eddie Garcia that Eddie sounded like a good guy and that the footage could ruin Diddy, and that he wanted Eddie to do something about this video. And so Eddie was explaining that he didn't have access to provide the video. He didn't have the credentials to get the video from the server, something that Officer Israel Flores had testified to, because he was one of the first witnesses called, that really the only people who could grab the video, obtain the video, was the director of security. And so that was Bill Medrano. And so Bill did have access to the server, and Diddy had offered to take care of Eddie Garcia and whatever he needed. And what did Eddie think that this taking care of meant? Well, he thought it meant financially. And so Eddie Garcia then went back to work. He reached out to Bill Medrano, who again is his supervisor, the director of security, and Bill said that he would do it. He would get the video for Diddy, but he would do it for a price, and that price was $50,000. And so Eddie had called Christina Coram back and Christina gave the phone to Diddy. And Diddy sounded super excited, according to Eddie, and referred to Eddie as Eddie, my angel. I knew you could help. I knew you could do it. And this is Diddy talking to Eddie at this point. And then Eddie had told Bill, after he got off the phone with Diddy, that everything was a go and that Diddy wanted this particular video ASAP. And so Bill Medrano showed up to work the next day. He went up to the server room. He pulled the video and just put it on a thumb drive, and then the thumb drive was then given to Eddie. And so then Eddie told Christina Coram and Diddy that he had the thumb drive of the video. Diddy responded that he was happy and excited about this, and Diddy gave Eddie an address to meet with him ASAP because he wanted this video now. And so what we see is kind of Eddie's timesheet from the day when he goes into work, leaves work, that type of thing. But on this particular day, when Eddie was turning over this video to Diddy, it's now March 7th, but it shows that Eddie had been working that day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. However, he being Eddie, said that while he was on the stand, that Bill said that if anyone were to ask where he was when he wasn't at the hotel, just to say that he was running errands. And in a way, he was kind of running errands. That errand was to meet Diddy to exchange this video in exchange for money. And so Eddie had explained that he had arrived to a high-rise building. He called Christina Coram's number. Then somebody somebody from security came down. Eddie said he can't remember the name, so we don't know who this particular security guard was, but Eddie was saying that this security guard was telling Eddie that he did a good thing, and so when Eddie arrived, it was Diddy, Christina Karam, and then this unnamed bodyguard, and that Diddy seemed super happy and excited just about obtaining this video. Diddy asked Eddie if he had it being the drive, and Eddie just handed it over. So then Diddy left the room, but then when he returned, Diddy was asking whether or not this was the one and only copy. Are there other copies? Are there other duplicates out there? And that he didn't want this video to get out. He was even asked if there's anything stored on the cloud or any backups of this video. And so then Eddie just makes sure with Bill that this is the one and only copy, and Bill told Eddie it was the one and only copy. And so Eddie said that Diddy said it wasn't just him that was concerned about this video getting out, but that Cassie was concerned about this video getting out, and whether or not Cassie might possibly make a police report. This was Eddie's concern to Diddy, and Diddy told Eddie that Cassie knew about this and she wanted this video pulled too. So then Diddy FaceTimes Cassie. Cassie was wearing a hoodie, we presume, possibly to cover up her injuries, that type of thing. But it's not like we saw any exhibit photos of what she looked like after the fact, beyond what she had testified to when she was testifying. But Eddie had explained that Diddy directed Cassie to tell Eddie that she wanted this video gone too.
By the way, talking a big lawsuit like this, litigation, how could I not call out experts in this area of the law? I'm talking about our great partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm, and honestly, they have an amazing track record. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta, and not to mention $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered them just $5,000 in that case. And even if you think your case isn't worth, millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. Everything from signing contracts, uploading documents, talking to your legal team, it can all be done through your phone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC sidebar. He called himself the devil and allegedly dangled a woman over a 17-story balcony. Today, jurors heard chilling testimony in court in Sean Diddy Combs' sex crimes trial. A longtime friend of Cassie Ventura took the stand, accusing Sean Combs of violent outbursts, a death threat, and instilling fear. I'm going to break it all down with Law&Crime's reporter Elizabeth Millner, who is in that courtroom for all of it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs took yet another chilling turn today when a woman took the stand to describe a night that she says she will never forget, because she claims Combs allegedly lifted her off the ground and dangled her over the edge of a balcony, screaming at her, "You know what the bleep you did." And that's not all. She told jurors that this hip-hop mogul once made a terrifying threat about killing her. We're going to get into all of these harrowing details and a lot more. So to do that, let me bring on Law&Crime's reporter Elizabeth Millner, who is inside that courtroom for every moment of the testimony in action. Elizabeth, great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come back here on Sidebar. Before we even get into that, something interesting that happened today. The way this whole day started, my understanding, is there was a discussion about D-Rock. D-Rock, one of Sean Combs' security members. He's come up a lot in testimony. Were there messages between Combs and D-Rock that were part of the conversation even before the first witness took the stand?
So what a lot of people don't realize is that when we get into the courtroom in the morning, more often than not, there's arguments outside of the presence of the jury. Then the jury is later brought in after these arguments. And so the jury was able to see all of these messages. They were present while this stipulation was read between the parties. So first thing right off the top this morning, before we had the first witness take the stand, so nobody's on the witness stand during this, but the government presents this stipulation between the parties. It pertains to March 5th of 2024, when Homeland Security investigation seized a cell phone from Diddy's Miami home, which is the Two-Star Island property. And so the judge admitted these exhibits. And so what we saw from the next exhibit was this preliminary device report, and it confirmed that Apple IDs, Diddy's Twitter, and Snapchat were, I guess, extracted from the devices. And so we saw some text messages going back to September 13th of 2025, which the owner, which we presume to be Diddy or Sean Combs, said, "Hit my shorty, ask her what's going on." D-Rock writes, "Okay." And again, I'm paraphrasing here because those messages went by super fast, but the owner of this device and cell phone, again, who we presume to be Diddy, said, "I thought you were coming to the concert next week." D-Rock says something along the lines of, "Okay," and then the owner of this device said, "Call me," because when we're seeing these messages displayed, it doesn't say Diddy or PD or Love, none of that. It literally says owner, so that's why we presume it to be Diddy. And then D-Rock writes, "She wants to see you. Cass calling the studio looking for you." The owner of these devices say, "Okay, it's time for the ice. What's Cass doing?" D-Rock responds, "I was just checking on her. Cass was eating. She wants to see you. Talking to Cass, just gave her an ice pack." The owner says, "Does the eye look better?" And then D-Rock responded, "Rio and Justin saw her eye. We said a fight broke out in the club." And so we presume that obviously the Cass in this situation is Cassie Ventura. But it seemed like kind of the gist of these text messages were just about Diddy checking up on Cassie after some type of incident had occurred. Again, this was from September 13th of 2015, and whatever this incident was resulted in her having an injury that probably was bad enough that it needed an ice pack. And so I think the government was just kind of putting these in. They didn't add much context outside of just showing these messages. So possibly maybe the jury was confused on why we're seeing this with no witness to kind of break it all down. But those were admitted today before the witness took the stand.
So I think that's important. It's important because if you're saying this is a racketeering case and that he was using his assistants and his bodyguards to further criminal activity, and you see him essentially using his bodyguard to maybe cover up evidence of a violent episode, maybe evidence of force that was used for sex trafficking, and that he uses his security to constantly check up on Cassie, maybe cover up what was really going on, you could see the value of it. It also makes me wonder, is D-Rock going to take the stand? I mean, who else is going to take the stand? We got another, 4 weeks of trial. It'll be very interesting to see who else may take the stand. If you're talking about a racketeering conspiracy and, there's a lot of people a part of this alleged criminal enterprise, you have to wonder if other people in the inner circle are going to testify against him. Okay, so talking text, putting that to the side, talking digital evidence, the first witness of the day was forensic video expert Frank Piazza. Now, my understanding is that his testimony was centered around key pieces of digital evidence, really the 2016 tape, the footage of Sean Combs purportedly beating up Cassandra Ventura. Again, she's victim one in this case. By the way, they say that was after a freak-off, so it helps with the sex trafficking claim. And the whole gist of it is the video footage we have, the video footage that the jury will see, is it real? Is it accurate? Is it authentic? What did Frank Piazza have to say about all that?
Yeah, so it was interesting kind of the way Frank Piazza was kind of breaking everything down. So to your point, Jesse, he is a forensic audio and video editor, and he has his own company where he does consulting, authentication, services, etc. And that has been going back the past 25 years because it began in 2000. But he's been doing this type of work at least in the earliest of 1995, where I was just a wee little baby around that time. But as far as just what he did for this case, and I thought what was an interesting point that the government said right at the beginning of his testimony is that normally he's a defense witness that is testifying. And so this time it's a little different. He was retained by the government. But as far as what he had he had analyzed cell phone video, surveillance video pertaining to the hotel incident in 2016, but also the sex videos, as he calls them, or the freak-off videos that we presume them to be, that were provided by the government. And so Frank Piazza explained that he analyzed 5 cell phone and surveillance videos. It was 3 different camera angles from the surveillance video, and then 2 cell phone videos compiled together. And so as far as the cell phone videos go, and this was something that Officer Israel Flores alluded to when he was testifying, where he had explained that he had recorded the surveillance system that I guess was inside the Intercontinental Hotel back in, I guess, the security server, and it was recorded on an iPhone 6, according to Piazza. He says that there is color issues and lighting issues because of just, I guess, the old model of this particular phone, but the cell phone can still record an entire video. And so we saw an exhibit, that being the surveillance video from the hotel incident that was captured on the cell phone. So you can see kind of a little shaky in the hand, but you could also see Diddy hitting Cassie, kicking her and dragging her. And then he was explaining kind of the frame rates, them being about 30 frames per second. And his conclusion of this was that the cell phone video was not manipulated or tampered with, and that the cell phone recording was from the native system and it captured clean video from the surveillance system. Now, as far as the surveillance video goes, he did admit that there were some speed playback issues and it actually played back faster than normal. He explained that there were areas kind of motion activity, which again, Israel Flores had talked about during his testimony, that the cameras at the Intercontinental Hotel are motion activated. And Piazza explained that there were issues with the timestamp. So he said he was able to correct the speed issue and the distortion of the video as best as he could. And Piazza was able to slow down the video because, again, he said that the playback played a little bit faster than normal. And so he says the video he compiled together was the cell phone video, surveillance video, playing at a speed that would have been in real time. And so he says his conclusion as far as the surveillance video goes is that it wasn't manually altered, there are no anomalies going onto the file, and that the surveillance video accurately plays back the underlying footage. And so we see an exhibit of the corrected surveillance video, but only the first 15 seconds of that. Another exhibit of the continued video playing for about 55 seconds, and just more exhibits of them just kind of playing the surveillance video that we've seen a bunch of different times. And that Piazza was explaining that the timestamp kind of corrected itself and that the motion activity kind of embedded into the camera system caused it to jump ahead. And so, again, Piazza compiled all those 3 surveillance videos and cell phone videos into one big compilation that we did see in court today.
And basically, the end of the day, these are videos that the jury can rely upon. They're authentic. It purports to show what it purports to show. And there was a lot of pretrial litigation about this. Even the defense wanted to make sure that these videos wouldn't come in because they said that there was a chance they were manipulated or altered or distorted in some way. Was there anything specific about the compilation that stood out to you?
Yeah, well, the compilation in its entirety, including the black frames that were kind of put into the video so that way the jurors could realize that, okay, a camera's about to cut to another position in the surveillance video. But altogether, the total runtime, or TRT as we call it in the biz, was 11 minutes and 53 seconds. So the first 10 seconds is something we've all seen. Cassie with her black bag walking down the hallway in the direction of the camera. The next 20 seconds captures multiple angles of Cassie walking down the hallway. You can see the black frames kind of within those first 30 seconds start to show, which again shows that these cameras are switching around. So in the next 4 minutes of this video, we see Diddy running down the hallway, and then it's something that we've all seen before at this point. It's him kicking, punching, dragging Cassie. Diddy grabs Cassie's bags. Cassie makes a call using the hotel line, kind of over off the wall near that elevator bank or elevator lobby. Then we see Diddy walking back to the hotel room. He reemerges without the bags. He grabs the cell phone from Cassie, throws the vase at Cassie. Again, things that we've already seen before. Cassie using the hotel phone. Diddy says something to her because when this video is playing, even though kind of it's a mixture of the surveillance video as well as the cell phone video, we're not hearing any type of audio. So we don't know what is being said between the two parties. Even when Officer Flores arrives, kind of in this next portion, we don't hear what he's saying, although when he was testifying, he explained that he was kind of zooming in to see his shoes and how shiny they were, but we didn't hear that when the video played today. So after Officer Flores arrives, both Flores and Cassie are telling Diddy something. Again, we're not able to hear it. Then we see that zoom in into Officer Flores's shoes. Cassie walks away. Flores makes a call on that same hotel phone, and then that's the end of the cell phone video. Then Diddy reappears in the hallway. Israel Flores is following behind him. Then you see Diddy and Israel Flores talking in that hallway. And then Cassie reemerges on the other side of the hallway, on the opposite side, goes towards the hotel room. Then you see Cassie, Diddy, Israel Flores go off camera. Then Cassie reemerges with her bags. Then Israel Flores reemerges. Then Diddy reemerges holding a cell phone. And the end of the clip, and again, this is an 11-minute video. I kind of just compiled it all together. The end of the clip, you see Diddy putting a cell phone to his ear, and then the video ends. And so while on the stand, Frank Piazza was explaining that either Diddy was making a call or he was receiving a call, one way or the other, we see the video end with Diddy on the phone, on his cell phone.
And the jury will have to be tasked with, is that consistent with what Cassie testified to and maybe what others had testified to? And, again, it seems like it shows what we all think it shows, although I was curious. What the cross-examination was going to be. What was the defense going to question him about? And I understand that defense attorney Tenny Garagos questioned him. What exactly did she question him about? What was the strategy there?
Yeah, so it seemed like really the focus of the cross-examination of Frank Piazza was the timestamps. First, Tenny Garagos, she was discussing what is your understanding of the source of the video and how they came into your possession. Piazza says that the surveillance video was exported from the native system, and then the cell phone video was a recording of the native system, kind of confirming what Officer Israel Flores says. But I think the big mystery is where the surveillance video was actually sourced from. And according to Piazza, he wasn't sure how the surveillance video came into the government's possession. But as far as just more of the cross-examination, we do see an exhibit of the same hotel video showing Cassie in that elevator bank or lobby. But what's interesting is during the cross-examination is that Tenny Garagos isn't referring to the male or the female seen on the video as Cassandra Ventura or Cassie, or the male being Sean Combs or Diddy or PD or Love or anything like that. Instead, it's just the male in the video, the female in the video, not using their real names. But going back to the timestamp issue, you see the timestamp kind of jump. It says that 2 minutes and 15 seconds are played throughout this entire duration of the video. However, the video itself was about 3 minutes long. And then you see one timestamp jump from 10:50 to 10:56. And Frank Piazza was explaining that when the video gets pixelated, that's when you kind of see the timestamp jump, and that I guess within the system it kind of corrects itself, but the time code was kind of struggling. But if you count the frames, the system is constantly correcting itself. So then you see another timestamp issue where it jumps from 11:57 to 12:08. And in that particular one, you see Diddy kind of holding Cassie's bags in that elevator bank or elevator lobby. And then next thing you know, they're just suddenly on the ground. And so Frank Piazza was explaining it's not uncommon for this to happen for security systems. He was explaining that the system's motion that it's getting will kind of make that change. And while the female, aka Cassie, was standing in the corner, there wasn't much movement. So the system's not kind of picking up on the fact that there is movement. There is human beings in there who are breathing and moving along. But instead, because they're kind of standing still in this position, the camera's not capturing that particular moment. And that kind of accounts for why that you see this sudden time jump. And so then they got more into the timestamps jumping again, and it was really kind of just like, it seemed like we were going frame by frame, seconds by seconds, where you're just kind of seeing just these different instances of the time jumping. But according to Frank Piazza, he maintained that that this was kind of a clear and accurate depiction. And again, he had those black frames kind of embedded in between the different camera shots kind of changing. So it seems like when the jury does go back for deliberations, instead of having the entire exhibits in different pieces and different chunks, they're able to just watch this 11-minute and 53-second video to kind of see it all come together. And again, to your point, Jesse, the defense didn't want the compilation video to be going back with the jury for their deliberations. They just wanted the government to use it as a demonstrative, but the judge ruled that it will go back with the jury once we eventually get to deliberations on this.
And the relevance of this, of course, is for the prosecution. They want to say this is evidence of Combs using force to essentially coerce Cassandra Ventura into sex trafficking, that she had just left a freak off, that he's literally dragging her back in the direction of the room. Not only did we finally hear from Jane, alleged victim 2 in this case, another person claiming she was coerced into prolonged sexual episodes at Sean Diddy Combs' request, but we also heard the defense grill the woman who claims Combs dangled her off of a 17-story balcony. And also, the judge got quite angry at the rap mogul for the way he was looking at the jurors. That and more with Law and Crime's in-court reporter Elizabeth Millner. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. I know I say this every day, but today was yet another important day of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial. You had alleged victim 2, Jane, take the stand, arguably the second most important witness in this case behind Cassandra Ventura, alleged victim number 1, because she makes up individual sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution charges. She helps support the racketeering charge. But you had also the defense really grill a key witness, a woman who claims she was dangled off of a 17-story balcony by Combs. But with the defense cross-examining her, the question becomes, is that true? And the judge, by the way, was none too happy with how Combs was behaving in court. So a lot to get into. We're going to get into it all right now. Let me bring on Law and Crime's in-court reporter, Elizabeth Millner. Elizabeth, so good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. As always, I want to get right into the continued cross-examination of Brianna Bongolin. The cross-examination continued by Nicole Westmoreland. This is a key witness. She had testified to being dangled by Sean Combs off of a 17-story balcony. It goes to the pattern of abuse of women for racketeering. If Cassie had seen this or knew about it, it goes to the idea of coercion in sex trafficking. Look at the environment Cassie was around, the violence she was around. Did she really consent to freak-offs when Combs is around doing all these things? And Bongolin also talked about distributing drugs to Cassie and Combs. Drug charges, underlying predicate crime of racketeering, just goes to the overall environment, the idea of drugs being used during all of this. So Westmoreland really dug in today, and my understanding is she started talking about drugs, threats, and maybe most importantly, Bongolin didn't leave.
Yeah, and so when they continued Brianna, a.k.a. Bonna's cross this morning, Nicole Westmoreland just came out with just exhibits to kind of show her. So, for example, we saw one exhibit. It was an exhibit we had seen while Brianna or Bonna had been testifying under direct, where it showed Cassie and the friend of hers named Bad Boy spelled with an I, no relation to Diddy's Bad Boy, none of that. The photo is from April 24th of 2016 with the caption, "Best Dressed Photographer." And so this was the exact same day that Bonna had accused Diddy of threatening to kill her, saying something along the lines of, "I'm the devil, I could kill you." And so Bonna says it was on or around this day where Diddy had threatened her. So I think what the defense was trying to kind of point out is maybe the dates were wrong. Maybe this didn't happen on this particular day. But then we saw another exhibit photo from May 10th of 2016 from Bonna to Cassie. It's a photo of drugs. Now, Bonna, while she was on the stand today, couldn't say or even remember necessarily what type of drug it specifically was, but just kind of looking at the photo, it definitely was a crystallized substance of something. It kind of had like a brownish, whitish color. I don't want to presume what it was, but you could tell it was definitely drugs, and it was photographed next to a dime. And so Nicole Westmoreland asked Bonna, "You would agree that this was taken after Diddy threatened you?" And Bonna replied, "True. You went on as business as usual with Miss Ventura, a.k.a. Cassie." And Bonna replied, "Yes." Then we saw another exhibit photo from May 31st of 2016. And I think it was a text that accompanied with the line of, "Can I get an amen?" But the photo that went with this particular text message from Bonna to Cassie again, it was a photo showing drugs, I think in her hand or in somebody's hand. And it was drugs like pills that were blue and white. Also, you could see like a powdery white substance. Brianna couldn't verify what particular drugs were in that little baggie that the picture was taken with, but Nicole Westmoreland asked, "You told us at the end of April 2016 that Mr. Combs had threatened your life, but you continued dealing with Cassie. You weren't too scared to do that, were you?" And Brianna replied, "I guess not." And so I think what the defense was trying to point out is even through allegations of threats to Bonna from Diddy or anything like that, that still she continued to have these relationships with Cassie, that she would show up back to Cassie's apartment, the very apartment where she was allegedly dangled from that 17th 17-story balcony. And so I think the defense was trying to be pretty effective as far as being like, well, even though you were scared of Diddy, even though you say you were threatened by him and that you were terrified of him and fearful of him, that you still continued hanging out and dealing with his girlfriend.
And weren't there a lot of texts? I mean, texts in this case, my gosh. Whatever witness you want to talk about, whether it's Mia with social media posts or her text to Combs or Cassie Ventura's text, they're being used to show there's another side of the story, that if you really claim you're the victim of this tormentor and this victim of this sex trafficker, why are you writing praising texts of him? Why are you saying you love him? Why are you encouraging freak offs or trying to set them up? What were the text messages that Ms. Bongolan was confronted with today?
Yeah, we saw a number of text exhibits. So, for example, we saw an exhibit from October 8th of 2016. It was a text message between Cassie, Bonna, and I believe Deontay, where Cassie had asked them, you ladies want to come over, have wine, smoke, cooking, sleep over tonight? And I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. And I believe it was Deontay that had replied, I was just about to hit you, LOL. And then Bonna responds, yeah, we can at like 8. And so Nicole Westmoreland asked, so you were willing to go back again to that exact same place where this incident had happened, where Diddy allegedly dangled Bonna from that 17th-story ledge off of Cassie's condo? And Bonna replied, yeah. And so then we saw another exhibit photo. It was text between Bonna and Cassie, these ones from October 10th of 2016, where, and again, always paraphrasing here, Cassie in this particular message had wrote, Coolio, what are you and Friday hungry for? And Friday was Bonna's then girlfriend. I believe her real name is Sarah, but she had gone by Friday. But then Bonna had responded, cool, hit you up later, love ya, Puff wants some. And so when she was talking about this particular Puff wants some, or P wants some, as she had put in this particular message, the defense was trying to point out, okay, well, what are you trying to get P, aka Diddy, as far as a sweatshirt or a t-shirt from, I guess, their clothing line? And so Nicole Westmoreland was like, so you're asking if he wants a t-shirt or a sweatshirt? And then Bonna replied, well, we had that FaceTime call after the incident. I was trying to be cool. And then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, didn't you tell the government during the FaceTime call that you didn't talk about the balcony incident? And then Bonna responds that she doesn't remember. So then we saw an exhibit photo from October 15th of 2016. So just a couple days after Cassie and Bonna had talked, and Bonna was asking if Puff wanted a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, Diddy actually messaged Bonna. And again, paraphrasing here because those text messages go pretty quick, where Diddy said something along the lines of, when friends get high with each other, they're not supposed to let friends F up. And then he had said something like, that's real whack. And then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, didn't Mr. Combs want you to stop doing drugs with Cassie? Something that they alluded to when Cassie was testifying. And Bonna responded, it was confusing with just everything going on. And so it seemed like she didn't kind of necessarily know why Diddy was texting her and calling her whack and referring to her as being kind of a whack friend and effing up and that type of thing. But it seemed like the defense really was trying to use her own words and her own messages against her. The defense was kind of teasing up this message because they wanted to get it in front of the jury. And it seems like they were able to do that, especially with the whole that Bonna was allegedly real whack for giving Cassie drugs, and something must have happened with the incident of the drugs too.
Yeah, so a couple of things there, right? I mean, if she was dangled off a 17-story balcony, the jury could say, I think it's kind of odd she's asking if he wants a sweatshirt 2 weeks later. If he's really this sex trafficker and this violent individual who is supplying people with drugs to make them more compliant for sexual episodes, why the concern? Why the concern about the drug use here? And this is what makes this not a clean prosecution. And I understand that was only the beginning, because Elizabeth, didn't they also really grill her about her lawsuit, the civil suit that she filed against Sean Combs? And it really concerned also the lawyer that she had at one point, who apparently she fired and then retained new counsel, which goes into this whole complexity of, was she making legitimate allegations, or were legitimate allegations being made on her behalf? What did they talk about with the lawsuit?
So the lawsuit, which I've read, I've covered this story when it was first filed just last year. And so the defense really kind of got into it with Bonna about this. And so Nicole Westmoreland was like, so you aren't saying that Cassie saw this? And then Bonna is like, well, I don't know. You have to ask her, but I heard her voice. Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, you said you hurt your leg and your neck and your back and you have nightmares and night terrors. You said the injuries in your demand letter weren't accurate. You said that Mr. Combs groped your breast. That was in your letter sent by Tyrone Blackburn, who again, Bonna said that she fired after he was getting information wrong that was sent in the demand letter, but also notably, he's an attorney who represents Little Rod Jones, who also is suing Diddy too. But as far as Nicole Westmoreland, during her line of questioning, she was like, well, is this true or not? And Bonna responds, that's incorrect about her breasts being groped to the point that it had left bruises on her body. She's asked, you reviewed your lawsuit. Your new civil lawyer said the exact same thing. And Bonna responds, I'm aware. Well, you told the government that Diddy or Puffy grabbed your breast. And then Brianna said, well, I told them where he placed his hands. Then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, on January 18th of 2024, during your first meeting with the government, you never mentioned that Mr. Combs grabbed your breast. And then Brianna responds, I don't remember. Nicole Westmoreland asks, well, isn't it true your lawyer, that being Tyrone Blackburn at the time, started that rumor and that wasn't true, but you still continue knowing that it wasn't true and you kept on repeating it, even though you knew it wasn't true? And Bonna responds, I can't speak for him, so I'm having a hard time answering. And she was really kind of struggling this morning to kind of answer the questions to the point where Nicole Westmoreland really kind of had to ask her the same questions in just different forms and fashions. And there were lots of responses of just long pauses, or I can't really speak for this particular person, or I'm having a hard time answering. And then she would ask kind of multiple times, can you re-say it? Can you rephrase this question? And then Nicole Westmoreland just comes out and is like, well, did you believe the only way to file the lawsuit was to say that Mr. Combs sexually assaulted you? And then Bonna responds, I don't recall. And so I think maybe there was a lot of apprehension in just Bonna's answers from today, but I feel like the defense was really kind of pointing out and really kind of showing to the jury that Bonna doesn't necessarily remember all the details, but she's still staying firm that this balcony incident happened, but then the details are wrong, the allegations are wrong. Sometimes in one letter, the dates are wrong, in another letter, the dates are this. And so I think especially towards the end of her cross-examination today, they really kind of honed in on when did this happen and are you sure that this incident did happen? It seemed like that's kind of where the questioning was leading up to, especially towards the end of her cross.
And didn't they also confront her with receipts, hotel receipts, to say, you claim Sean Combs is in one location when he might have been in a completely different location?
And so I am myself a receipts-proof timeline type of girl, and that's kind of an ode to Real Housewives. But they did kind of confront Bonna with the receipts and the proof. And so Bonna was alleging that this incident happened on September 26th or 25th of 2016. However, we see one exhibit photo. It's from the Trump Hotel. It's kind of a receipt from a hotel stay, and it was for Frank Black, who we now know was an alias that Diddy was using. And the arrival shows on this particular document that the arrival of Sean Combs, aka Frank Black, was on September 24th of 2016, and he stayed all the way until September 29th of 2016. And so even prior to us seeing this particular exhibit and this particular document, Nicole Westmoreland was asking Brianna, you worked on the Bad Boy tour. Do you remember Cassie and Diddy schedule during this time? Did you know that Mr. Combs was performing on September 25th of 2016? And that even he and Miss Ventura, who we know as Cassie, were in New Jersey at certain parts of this. And then Brianna is responding, I can't recall. And then Nicole Westmoreland asks, are you aware on September 26th of 2016 that Cassie and Diddy were at this charity event, and then Diddy later went to this other event? And Brianna responds, I don't know. And so while we're seeing this exhibit, we do see charges, including charges for breakfast on September 25th of 2016 and on September 26th of 2016, as well as September 27th of 2016, where you can see purchases for in-room breakfast for $210.31, $107.84, $102.77, and $344 for this breakfast, which is a lot of money for breakfast. But when you're somebody like Sean Combs, I feel like that's probably chump change to him. But at the end of this kind of line of questioning, then Nicole Westmoreland asked, well, you agree that one person can't be at the same place at the same time? And then it seemed like the defense, they were alleging because Bono testified that this incident happened on September 26th of 2016, where you can see from this particular document that Diddy wasn't even in Los Angeles around this time period. He was actually here in New York at the Trump Hotel during this particular time frame. And so I was kind of wondering to myself, why wasn't that just the first line of questioning? But I feel like towards the end, it might have been pretty effective, because if you're seeing this particular receipt, then there's possibly no way to prove that this might have happened on this particular day.
You know, look, I could see where the defense is saying you don't remember these details. How on earth can that be? But I imagine when she was questioned again on redirect by the prosecution, you know, they could say it's a traumatic episode. You might not remember the dates, the details, but it happened. And aren't they backed up with photographs of her injuries? I mean, was there a way the defense tried to argue against that? Was that something that the prosecution really focused in on redirect? I mean, what did the prosecution do to try to rehabilitate or clean up her testimony? And also, did the defense say anything about the photographs of the injuries?
Well, I'll take the second part of your question first, where the defense did kind of bring out Bona's injuries. And I remember yesterday saying, like, these were really kind of gnarly injuries that you could see. It was really of a bruised leg, it had a little hole poked in it, but they brought that photo out again. And so this was of Bona's injured leg. It's from September 26th of 2016. And we see the metadata of this photo that was taken, and it's at 9:45 a.m. And Bona is asked about this metadata from this photo. And so Diddy, you can see, is kind of nodding during this time frame, because that's when the defense kind of segued into that Diddy was on tour during this time frame, and that he was even in Los Angeles. He was over in New York or New Jersey, just on the opposite side of the country. And so then Nicole Westmoreland, towards the very, very end of her cross, is like, Mr. Combs didn't cause the injuries from the photos we saw. And Bono responds, I can't agree with you. Then we see that exhibit photo again of the bruise on Bona's leg and that hole, particularly in that bruise. And then Nicole Westmoreland's like, you came in here and you lied. And Bona ends her cross-examination by saying at the end, I can't agree with you. And so I felt like when the redirect happened, Bona kind of confirmed that she didn't see the government's meeting notes, which is something that a lot of witnesses have testified to, because the defense during their cross-examination, which began yesterday and continued into today, they were really kind of throwing her meeting notes at her when she told the prosecution these allegations on what specific meetings that she had had with them, and that Bona had explained that she never checked these particular documents for any type of accuracy. Then Bona says that the only conversations that she had with Cassie, as far as Cassie's lawsuit goes, was just about Cassie using Bona's name in her lawsuit, which she didn't want to happen. Bona didn't want her name to be used in Cassie's now settled lawsuit. And so Bona was asked, were you and Cassie trying to make up this story or tell Cassie what had happened to you? And then that was kind of an objection. It was sustained. Then Bona is asked by the prosecution, do you have any doubts that Mr. Combs held you up on the balcony? And Bona responds, I have no doubts. She is asked, did you tell Cassie that you were going to file a lawsuit? Bona says no. Are you getting money today to testify? And why are you here today? Bona says no, and she's here today, testifying today and even yesterday, to get justice, something that she had said a couple times during her testimony. Then she's asked by the prosecution, do you remember every single detail from the balcony incident? Bona says no. How did you feel when he held you on the balcony? I was terrified, she says. Bona confirms that the balcony incident did happen, and she spoke about this during every government meeting. And so it seemed that from her perspective, she was really adamant that this particular incident did happen, but she just wasn't clear about what date it had actually happened.
So I think the jury might have a field day trying to make sense of that testimony. I don't think it's arguably the strongest witness for the prosecution. And then we go into when she leaves the stand, wasn't an exhibit put up that caused a little bit of a stir?
Yeah, there was. And so this was an exhibit from March 25th of 2024. It was kind of one of those stipulations between the parties about the Okalaka airport, but it was about the particular data that was extracted, this one particularly from Christina Quorum's phone. And so you see these text messages between Cassie and Christina Quorum, and Cassie says, hey, I just found out something crazy. He came into my house while my friends were here. We were sleeping. He went to Bona, choked her, and dangled her feet off the balcony. Christina Coram responds, "What?" And Cassie says, "I have to stay away." And so the government really wanted to introduce this piece of evidence because I think that they might be kind of feeling some type of way, in a sense, that all of their witnesses, they can't recall these certain dates. But for this particular message, this was sent on September 30th of 2016. And so as far as just when this incident or alleged incident may have occurred, it might have occurred on September 30th, or it could have occurred on September 29th if you're interpreting it that way. Because again, Bona didn't recall what particular date this happened, but she's been adamant throughout her testimony that this did happen. So I think the government really wanted to introduce this piece of evidence because the defense was implying that Bona was lying. And so they wanted to show, okay, well, somebody told Cassie that this had happened. Cassie is talking to Christina Coram about this. And so that message will go back to the jury when they do deliberate on this case soon, or eventually, I should say.